Howdy folks, I'm meaty, and today I bring you another review. This time it's over a film that I had some folks recommend to me, Robot Wars. Robot Wars is a 1993 sci-fi film that was directed by Albert Band and produced by Full Moon Entertainment and Paramount Pictures. The 72-minute long film will be distributed by Paramount Pictures. Now, I noticed in the comments of my Robot Jocks video that some people consider this film to be a sort of sequel to Robot Jocks. Now, in terms of continuity, they are not related at all. But thematically, I can understand. Both are janky B-movies with stop-motion giant robots that fight one another. And both films have Danny Kamekona star in them, although he does play a different character in both films. However, an interesting difference is that Robot Wars was smart enough to make itself a direct-to-video release, which probably saved the studios a lot of money, as opposed to Robot Jocks releasing and then bombing in theaters. For this review, I'm actually going to be making quite a few comparisons between Robot Wars and Robot Jocks, so if you haven't yet, I suggest that you do see that prior review. But also note that I'll try to judge the film on its own merits as well, as it is a standalone entity. With all that said, what's the general story all about? Well, in the not-so-far-out future of 2041, the last remaining mega robot is being used as a glorified taxi for tourists. The robot, which is piloted by a man named Drake, Don Michael Paul, and his partner Stumpy, James Staley, encounters trouble from a group known as the Centros, which I assume is future slang for Central Americans. Drake fends off the Centros' attack, but is miffed that his chief Rooney didn't want to send help for the aging robot, as he wanted to show off its combat prowess for a visiting general from Asia, who is played by Danny Kamekona. Basically, there's a lot of future jargon and interpersonal conflict that I'm glossing over, while forgetting to mention a subplot that involves a woman named Dr. Fanning, Barbara Crampton, who is investigating a potential hidden weapon in the last remnants of 90s civilization. It's a lot of story setup that really just amounts to a bunch of wandering around and drawn-out dialogue that goes nowhere. I'm gonna be honest, the story just isn't that interesting in this film. While Robot Jocks had things to say about war and the nature of humanity and the ethicality of cloning and whatnot, Robot Wars just doesn't really say anything. I mean, when compared to Robot Jocks, the tone is consistent the whole way through. It's schlock and it knows it. Robot Wars is well aware that you are here to see giant robots fight, and it will dangle that carrot on a string for as long as it can. Along the way, you'll encounter such fun 90s tropes as casual racism, sexism, and sexual harassment. Of course, it isn't the whole film, but all of the jokes in it are based off of those elements. Very crude. And the previously mentioned hidden weapons subplot seems like an excuse to record a bunch of B-roll and pad out the already short runtime. If you cut out a lot of the aforementioned long walking segments and needless dialogue, you'd probably have around 40 to 30 minutes of decent footage and the plot really wouldn't suffer for it. So basically, don't watch this for the plot. Now, despite the story being overall very boring and padded, I do gotta hand it to the folks who acted in the film. Everyone is giving it their all with the dialogue they are given. My personal favorite character is Peter Haskell's Chief Rooney. He's just full of so much energy, and he has great chemistry when he bounces his arguments off of Don Michael Paul's Drake. And of course, special mention goes to James Staley's Stumpy, who is a fun, bumbling sidekick. Compared to Robot Jocks, these characters feel a lot less awkward to me, as they probably had a script that wasn't constantly being rewritten for different tones. Overall, very solid character acting. You know what else was solid? The set design. The The sets in this film are competently made and don't seem to have as much flimsy cardboard involved as Robot Jox did. For a B-movie, they really did bring out the best work that they could afford. Speaking of what they could afford, the visual effects were surprisingly decent for the time. The lasers are especially okay, especially when compared to what Robot Jox had. And the stop motion for the giant robots? It was okay as well, but sometimes it just looked like they were smashing two models together and calling it a fight. I really would have liked to see more of the Megabots, since they were obviously the stars of the show. But you really don't get anything involving two of them fighting until like the last 20 or so minutes. This was probably related to budget, which I'm sure this film didn't have a lot of. Finally, I want to briefly touch upon the score. The soundtrack was done by David Arkenstone, and it is, once again, alright. It isn't as bombastic as one would hope for with a giant robot movie. Sure, it's orchestral, but it feels pretty generic. In contrast, Robot Jox's score was much more memorable and inspiring. So, overall, would I recommend Robot Wars? My answer would be, only if you really have nothing else to watch. This review is already pretty short, and that's because Robot Wars just doesn't have much to latch onto. The story is boring, and unfortunately, a boring story makes for a mostly boring movie. The character acting is good, but characters alone can't make up for a film that overall lacks the charisma that Robot Jox had. It's competently made is what I can say, and it also gave me a greater appreciation for Robot Jox, because that film at least tried to be more than what it was. In fact, I'd suggest just watching Robot Jox instead and probably just skip this film. I don't like tearing into things like this, but I really struggle to say kind things about this film. Again, it isn't terrible, but you have more fun watching literally anything else. I guess you could say that this film really crashed and burned. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I apologize for the short runtime, but there really wasn't much to talk about with this one. I'm not sure when the next video will be, but I can say that if you hit the notification bell, you will be alerted when new uploads are up. And if you like this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. Also, feel free to leave recommendations in the comments below for what you would like to see reviewed next. With all that said, I hope you all have a wonderful day.
You can build them just the way you want, with the Rock'em Socket wrench. Then battle them. You can pulverize your enemy, take his best weapon, and put him on your robot with the Rock'em Socket wrench.
Who's next? Red Rocker, that too.
Sockle robots. A spinning uppercut. Knockout. Rock'em Sockle robots. You can mix them, match them, build them, battle them. Robots. New Rock'em Sock'em robots come with all these interchangeable parts, each sold separately.